Hey guys, so here we are again. This is episode 3. I'm going to be focusing mostly on drums today. Basically the miking of them and all that good stuff. I use live drums more often than not, which means that, it's more of a process than using a drum machine. I do like drum machines, they're helpful, but in this particular genre, I think out of, the 3 albums we've done, I've maybe used an electronic drum track like once. It was used on a cover of Alicia Keys' Unthinkable that I did on saxophone. So I'm going to show you guys the microphones that I use. Then we're going to get a level and hopefully get a good take. So this is just a cheapo mic set that I got. It's nothing crazy, but it gets the job done. I really don't think it would do well in live settings. I think these microphones would have too much bleed. And the one microphone that's missing is my bass. I just leave it set up. So this is the microphone for my kick drum or my bass drum. And you can see it has a larger diaphragm. I've taken the screen off so that way you can see the actual microphone that's in there. So the larger the microphone is, the more frequencies it picks up, especially low frequencies. So this being a bass mic, that's why this thing is so big. So here we have just the basic set. 2 rack toms, snare drum, floor tom. These clips are for these pencil mics, which are overheads, and then these clips are to clip these microphones onto the rim of the drum. So they essentially go like that. So yeah, nothing too fancy schmancy. Most studios will use something like this. If you're doing studio recordings, you don't need the best kit because you don't have to worry about bleed, assuming that no 2 instruments are playing together. But I did recently do a version of Comin' Home Baby that we released where I recorded the congas along with the drums, and I didn't really get too much bleed. I think you guys remember this mixer, and I have an interface that only records stereo. So I need a lot more than 2 tracks to record these drums, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get a mix here, and I like to tweak settings. So let's say I'm doing the bass drum, I'm gonna kill my highs, raise my lows, If I'm doing a snare drum, it's gonna be a little bit more highs, This doesn't have mids, so I'm losing out there. But I've used this mixer, and this mixer is powered, and I've used another mixer that pretty much have never done me wrong. So the other thing here is there's a graphic equalizer for the entire thing. So this has more, as you can see, it covers more frequencies. But of course, this is for the overall mix, not for each individual track. So this also looks a heck of a lot like what my Pro Tools mix looks like, because it's the exact same concept. Here I have a phone level, and then I have just a dB meter here of sorts. It's not really the best, but it works. This also has a boatload of sound effects that I never use, like reverb and all that stuff. The other cool part is you can have an SD card in it, you can USB out, all sorts of crazy stuff, but I generally use this in the traditional way. So what's going to happen is we're going to pipe this into my interface over there, and that will be the drum track. So one of the things about this process that I have with mixing drums is I have what I call a chicken salad problem. And this happens a lot when I have to do recordings for people. Like, one guy wanted me to make a better recording out of a cell phone recording. And it was just, I mean, I did make it better, but what I started with wasn't ideal, you know? So I call that the proverbial chicken salad problem. And the saying is, I can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit. So if the original track that I have to work with is not to par, at least, with this, for example, the cell phone recording, obviously he's recording it through a small mic, so you're not going to be getting a lot of bass, and, you know, it was all high mids. So I had to do some really creative finagling. I did get the thing to sound better, but it wasn't obviously the best it could be because of the equipment it was recorded on. Okay guys, I realized there was something that I forgot to do. I was just listening to this track. I did wind up tweaking it a little bit. I didn't realize it before, but my EP treble was way too low. I'm just going to turn this down. It's not like I'm not going to turn it so it's inaudible, but it's not like you guys really need to hear the music. The bigger thing we're going to look at is this meter. So we really want it to be around -3. -3 is the industry standard for CDs, and that also seems to, by proxy, be the industry standard for releasing digital music. That is MP3s and MP4s, you know, that are on vendors like iTunes and Amazon and all that jazz. So depending on the genre, when you're dealing with your master meter here, you may want to be a little bit above, a little bit below. When I see hip-hop tracks that are pre-made, at least modern ones, I should really say, things like trap and stuff like that, I always see it just right there on -3, like it's just steady. There's no dynamics, but this music has dynamics, so we're gonna want this meter to rise and fall a little bit, but not too much. So I'm gonna go ahead and play it, and, you know, we'll also mess with our plugins here in a second, but let's see here. Okay, so let's include my scratch drums. Yeah. So even with the drums, it's not loud enough. So first I'm gonna go in and make sure, yeah, okay, so I put in my standard master there. I'm not gonna mess with the EQ until I actually do the drums. Let's see. Deverb is fine, so let's take a look. This is what I generally mess with to make this hit -3 or you know, a decent dB level. Okay, so that's much better for now. You saw me mess with my compression, my ratio. You saw me mess around with my gain. The gain is not a volume knob, but it will essentially make it louder, you know. So you see that we were hovering, let's see here. So you can see when the solos come in, it's a lot more dynamic. So what I want to do is listen to the beginning. Sorry guys, I'm at my studio and it's also a business, and I just got one of those goofy calls from people pretending to be Google. Anyway, so where was I? Ah yes, I want to listen to the beginning of this. So I'm just going to go ahead and select the slice. Okay, so you can see since there's more hits, we wound up being, you know, almost consistently around -3 there. Rest assured, we will be doing this again in my final mix and master. I almost forgot to issue this little disclaimer to you guys. So, most of the time in the studio world, you'll have different people mastering your tracks. So, the idea is that mixing and mastering should be done through different systems. And ideally, the mastering should be done by somebody who has really high-end equipment. And since I do this mostly on my own, essentially it's because I know what I want it to sound like. And I've had other people master my stuff, and I'm never a fan of it because they think it sounds too digital, it sounds too bright, and I like to have what I call a cool sound rather than a warm sound. And that gets lost. It kind of, I've set presets like that compressor and everything you saw to give me a specific studio sound. So that way when you listen to something, you know that it's my studio. And at least on the weather service stuff, that's incredibly true. So what I like to do is I just do the same thing. I listen to it through different systems, and then I write down, okay, well, through this big system, there's too much bass or whatever, you know, and then I go back and I tweak it. And then I also listen to it through terrible systems like my phone, because, you know, it's not going to carry really good bass, and it gives me basically a worst case scenario mix. Aventone mix cubes often are used as a worst case scenario mix. They're basically, in my opinion, they're basically glorified old school car speakers. You know, I used to have a pair. I wound up, I mean, I played with them a little bit, but it didn't really change my world very much. So when you're mastering, which we'll get to, we're going to listen to it through different speakers. I'm going to go to my buddy's house where he's got speakers as tall as I am, so I can hear it there. And I'm also going to listen to it through my regular old floor speakers. Anyway, off to set up the drums. so this is my, seriously, you can't just hold that down. This is my preliminary setup. I have 2 extra channels here. If I wanted to, I could add, you know, a couple of condenser microphones just to, you know, enhance the mix, but I think I'm gonna be okay. So here we have, I think this mic is a bit high, but this is just, you know, set up for now. I'm gonna tweak it when my drum student comes in and starts playing these drums. Oh, look at that, I forgot to mic the snare, or wire the snare down there. So that's something I gotta deal with. But when we go back over here to my mixer, anytime you're doing mixing work, you're going to want to do it in some type of a logical way. So if I have 4 people using microphones, I'll have them go from left to right of the stage. So that way I know, you know, not stage left, but my left. That way I know which one is which, you know, and it just keeps it simple, because then you don't have to sit around here playing with levels trying to figure out which microphone is it I'm going to turn up, you know. So in this circumstance, I go from low to high. The nice part about having 2 extra channels is I can separate out, you know, so I know that I can't screw this up. I can separate out my overheads. So the overheads I already panned to where they need to be, and obviously we're going to have to deal with these levels. So the other thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want more high than low, obviously. So just for now, until I actually hear these drums get played, I'm going to put those just center, and then my lows are all the way down. I'm not going to have any effects on any of these, so we're just going to go ahead and make sure they're all down. Yeah. Some people like to use effects in mixers. That's wonderful, but I prefer to be able to control it in Pro Tools. Again, remember, we are stuck with this mix. Let that sink in. The other thing I'm going to do is turn these trims down. Okay. Now, as I said, I go low to high, bass drum, floor tom, low rack tom, high rack tom. This is going to be my snare. So everything. Okay, so I set up my bass drum for you guys before. I'm going to wind up probably just adding a little bit of high to my 2 toms. Again, this is just guessing at this point. I don't know what it's really going to sound like, but we'll find out. So floor tom, the 2 racks. Oh, did that wrong. So since this is the higher tom, I'm going to, you know, maybe put it in the middle there. And then I'm going to plug in my snare and just do a preliminary EQ on that. Thing is I'm not going to know what this is going to sound like until it gets played. So we're going to wait for my drumming student to come and see how this goes. So I'm not going to film my student doing the actual sound check. To test drums, essentially what you want to do, because we're multi-tracking, is you just want to get, say, the snare drum first. You have him play that a few times until you think it sounds okay. And then you move on to another drum, say your high tom, your low tom, so on and so forth. So you want to test each individual drum first, even the cymbals, you know, for my overheads, right? And all that good stuff. Oh, hello, Motif. So we're going to go ahead and get this kit up and running, and we'll see you in a bit.